Very much, as was introduced, my name is Jang Dal-jung. I am retired professor, but I am very happy to be here and to meet my old friends from Australia, United States, and Japan, and all other countries. And it's a great honor to preside over this session. And whenever I talk about trust, I used to quote quite interesting Japanese former Prime Minister's joke. The former Japanese Prime Minister Yoshida Shigeru, he is, some of you may know, but some of the students who may not know him, he is known as the father of post-war Japan. And he once he retired, and his villa in Oiso is southern part of Tokyo, and Japanese reporters dropped by his villa, and they found out that there was no fences surrounding his villa facing the ocean. And then Japanese journalists asked, why you don't have fences surrounding your villa? And his joke was very interesting to me, and I often told this story to some of my students on and up. And he told the reporters that the villa facing the ocean side is America. America will not invade my home, and I don't have to have a fence. That tells something about the trust between Japan and U.S. And I told this story to Chinese friends when I was in Beijing, that whether we can trust you as Mr. Yoshida Shigeru did about U.S. And they didn't give us a concrete answer. But this is the situation Korea is finding itself in actually now. But today, we are talking, this session, we are going to talk very interesting topic about trust building process on the Korean Peninsula. Actually, the concept of trust building is a key concept of the current Park Geun-hye government, especially President Park Geun-hye seems to be very much committed to building trust on the Korean Peninsula. Here we have very interesting or very meaningful lessons from German experiences. We have a distinguished German speaker, Mr. Zeit. He is the Inspector General of German Foreign Office. I don't know exactly what you are doing as an Inspector General at the Foreign Ministry. Can you tell us before you discuss present your papers, and just give us some idea about what the role the Inspector General is doing?
In fact, my role is not to trust the own people. This means I have to travel around the world and inspect the German embassies all over the world, whether they are doing a good job or not.
Okay, then I will turn to Mr. Zeit to start his talks on trust building.
And I will follow up on your remark, Professor Chang, on the fences around the villa of the former Japanese Prime Minister. In 1984, there was a meeting between the German Foreign Minister Hans-Dietrich Genscher and the Soviet Foreign Minister Gromyko. It was in the framework of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe. And Genscher was making the point that we need trust-building measures, monitoring measures, in particular with regard to military exercises. And Gromyko was answering, well, I exactly know what you want to do, Mr. Genscher. You want to cut a hole into the Iron Curtain so that your spies can move through and watch our maneuvers and our military exercises. Mr. Genscher replied, Your Excellency, trust me, we do not want to cut a hole into the Iron Curtain. We want to remove the Iron Curtain at all. Germany has a wide and, in our experience, very positive experience with trust-building measures and confidence-building measures. In fact, the grand strategy of Germany after the Second World War was always, and still is, a strategy of trust and confidence-building measures. Why? After the Second World War, which ended in a military, political, and above all moral catastrophe for the German people, we had to rethink our whole approach to the world. We had to regain trust. And you can only gain trust when you build up confidence. First, among European partners, and secondly, during the Cold War, also trust vis-à-vis your Eastern European partners. This was not an easy task. What was a main instrument of trust building, confidence building vis-à-vis Eastern Europe? Because Eastern Europe has suffered enormously during the Second World War as a result of German aggression. Not only the Soviet Union, many other smaller countries in Eastern and Central Europe. So when the proposal came up to have a conference on security in Europe, a proposal made by Minister Gromyko in the 60s, Germany said, yes, let's have a conference on security in Europe, but don't limit ourselves only to security. We have to introduce another element, namely the element of cooperation. If you focus alone on security, you are losing the dynamic momentum of peaceful change. So finally, it was not only a conference of security in Europe, it became the conference on security and cooperation in Europe. And what were the three main elements? First, security. Secondly, economic cooperation. And thirdly, very important, the human dimension. And we believe in Germany that this process that was started in the 70s, that was laid down in the final act of the Helsinki Conference in 1975, helped to bring about peaceful change in Europe. We were not saying we want the collapse of the Eastern Bloc. We did not say we want the collapse of the Soviet Union. Nobody thought about that. But we thought about confidence building and trust. How can you achieve it in practical terms? First of all, and this might be also a lesson for Korea. First of all, as our Japanese colleague mentioned, until the 70s, arms control negotiations were mostly going on between the United States and the Soviet Union. And they were focusing on the nuclear issue. But conventional arms are sometimes as destructive as nuclear arms. And this is maybe a lesson for the Korean Peninsula. 40 kilometers north of this conference hall, you have the highest concentration of conventional forces in the world, to the north and to the south of the demilitarized zone. Confidence-building measures in the field of conventional armament could be an essential element also for future progress on the Korean Peninsula. What do I mean by this? If you look to the experience Europe has made, there is one document which is extremely helpful, it gives some guidance. This is the so-called Vienna document, within the framework of the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. For example, if you have military exercises, you inform others before it, and you invite monitors from the other countries to be present during your military exercises. This is creating trust, because they believe and they realize that these military exercises are not against them. Or if they are against a potential enemy, they are conducted in a transparent way. Secondly, as a regime of on-spot inspections in the conventional field for both sides, for all interested parties. There's a regulation. If we want to have on-spot inspections, follow a certain regulation, and this is possible for all interested parties. In the conventional field, could be very helpful in an area where you have military exercises that often create tensions. The second dimension was, and still is of highest importance, is the economic dimension. For Germany, after the Second World War, it was absolutely necessary to regain the trust of neighbors like France. Therefore, we pooled our economic resources, in particular in the field of coal and steel, which are needed to make heavy weapons in the European Economic Community, later on in the European Union. And we pooled our currency after German reunification. The euro is a direct result of German reunification, because we had to include all those others and we had to cooperate with the others in a joint monetary system to reduce their fear that Germany again would be the dominant power in Europe. Thirdly, the human dimension, very important. And in our experience, it helped a lot during the last 15 years of the Cold War to increase a better understanding among neighbors. Human dimension. Start with small steps. Exchange of artists, sportsmen. For example, I think it was very positive that the North Korean team participated in Incheon in the Asian Games. It was very positive. Let's have exchanges in the field of music, research, science. So these three dimensions, the security dimension, the economic dimension, and the human dimension, all could be integrated in a kind of comprehensive, let's call it, strategy. It will be a long-term strategy. And we understand also the policy by Her Excellency President Park Geun-hye as a long-term strategy of trust, peace building, confidence building. So what Her Excellency the President in her Dresden Declaration laid out was as far as we interpret it and see it in Germany, a well thought through strategy for future peaceful development on the Korean Peninsula. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jait, and very stimulating and very learning experience of German trust building process. But probably some discussions may raise, but you didn't talk about the internal consensus when West German government initiated a engagement with the Eastern groups. The Korean government is really facing a serious problem in creating South-South, so-called South-South, consensus, and probably we may have to hear about something about that. But probably some of the epochal events you had was after the Baader-Meinhof incident, your political situation has become rather moderate, and then that kind of political situation might have laid a foundation for Grant government's policy toward the engagement with the East European countries. But anyway, later on discussion sessions, I hope you can mention, if you can mention something about the internal dimensions of the trust building processes in German cases. Secondly, Professor Yoo Ho-yeol from Korea University, he was a former president of Korean Political Science Association. Also, he's very active. He's currently member of the Presidential Commission for Unification Preparatory Committee. Is it correct, the English translation? And he's in charge of politics and law division. And he's going to talk about the confidence building and the trust building processes in the Korean Peninsula. Professor Yeong, you may have about 15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, last week I had a chance to revisit Berlin and to discuss about German experience over the last at least 25 years since the breakdown of the war in Berlin, between the two sides. And I was surprised to see that still we have something to learn from German experience, and maybe we should learn more to prepare a successful unification process, or after the unification or integration process. But we still, on the Korean Peninsula, we're still waiting to see from North Korean side to our proposal toward North Korea, since President Park Geun-hye inaugurated last year, so-called the trust building process. Well, early this morning, our president made a speech at United Nations General Assembly, and she delivered, she made clear that still this government proposed toward North Korea or to the world that we want to build up trust on the Korean Peninsula by resolving the issues of peace and development and human rights. Well, it's almost the same that Mr. Jait raised in his speech. Those three main elements to build up trust between the two sides. However, it is not positive yet to achieve a concrete cooperation between the two sides based upon the roadmap that we propose to the North. Well, fortunately, I had chance to meet or to share views with North Korean diplomats or scholars on these particular issues last year and this year in some places in Europe. One of them is now head of North Korean delegate in United Nations, Ambassador Cha Seung-nam. We discuss about trust building process. And also this year we talk about our president speech at Dresden. The problem is that we propose in genuine terms to achieve some kind of confidence between the two sides. We realize that North Korea already developed nuclear weapons, and they maintain their closed system. And still, they were accused, not just by South Korea, but from international community on human rights violations. So we repeated to resolve those kind of issues, and then we could expect a better or improved relations toward unification, peaceful unification on the Korean Peninsula. You already knew what the elements of trust building process or South Korea's North Korea policy. I briefly touched upon those major or key issues or agendas in our policy toward North Korea. But North Korea's reaction or response is still different from our perspectives. The first one is the issue of peace or security. North Korea had conducted 3 times of nuclear weapon tests. And regardless of different observations from different places on the world, North Korea is assumed to develop or possess not the sophisticated weapons yet to be delivered on top of a missile. But they had announced that they had succeeded in developing different type of weapons, nuclear weapons, to be delivered in various areas, not just on the Korean side, but other areas. And even this year, they tested tens of missiles, different type of missiles, to show up their capability or ability to deliver any weapons for their own purposes or to achieve their own goals. And also, they already declared that they would continue to develop nuclear weapons with delivery systems. And also, they are saying that a parallel type of policy approach to develop nuclear weapons along with economic development plan. And therefore, they are saying that it is time for them to be secure enough to go out as they try to get investment from other countries. And also, they announced their special economic zone development programs. And also, they are saying that it is time for South Korea and United States to stop joint military drills, because North Korea is ready to talk peace and other political agendas with South Korea or the United States. They are saying that they would come to the six-party talks without any preconditions. I met North Korean delegate in Beijing last year, celebrating 10th years of six-party talks. And their ideas, or their ideas is based upon that they could talk, and they never promised to return back to the September 19th agreement. That means that they would denuclearize or demolish all nuclear facilities or programs. What they are saying is that they would discuss, and they would stop develop nuclear weapons when they felt that those conditions would be fulfilled. So very secure, and still time for us to bring North Korea or resume six-party talks together. The difference, main gaps between or perceptions on the security or deterrence or nuclear issues between North Korea and South Korea or among participant countries in the six-party talks. The second subject about the development. Our President Park Geun-hye mentioned this morning toward the world that if North Korea determined or decided to stop develop nuclear weapons, then South Korea with other countries around the world to support North Korean economic growth. And there are a lot of plans or proposals to support North Korea in various ways, regardless of May 21st measurement. Someone arguing that we should lift the sanction against North Korea prior to suggest any economic exchange cooperations programs toward North Korea, but without changing the May 21st measurement, there are a lot of ways that we could pursue cooperation with North Korea once North Korea tells us that they would stop developing nuclear weapons, and at a certain period of time they would dismantle all the nuclear facilities. That's what our government proposed toward North Korea. The third point is about human rights. Well, last night some reporter called me that they already got the manuals. Well, what our president delivered this morning, and she told me that she really upset or disappointed with what our president would deliver at the United Nations. So I asked her why. Then her response was that there was nothing to surprise her in her message to the United Nations General Assembly. Well, actually, our president never talked about generous economic assistance to North Korea. She mentioned about denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula and human rights. But it's a little bit tough because North Korean delegate was right in front of her. However, I think it is very important for us to pursue this kind of a goal to achieve peaceful unification with North Korea. Now we have 27 North Korean refugees living in South Korea. Well, there are different reasons for them to decide to defect or to decide to live in South Korea. But their motivation, what goal to live here in South Korea is that their life, even though it's very hard to survive this kind of competitive society like South Korea, but they told us they still believe that their decision was right because they felt freedom and liberty here in South Korea. And therefore, human rights issue is very important to persuade not just those 27 North Korean refugees living in South Korea, but their relatives and friends still living in North Korea. Without sending such kind of a humanitarian message to North Korea, how can he satisfy with those North Korean 24 million population in North Korea? So I think even though it's not the all that we should pursue our North Korea policy based upon human rights, well, to resolve the human rights violation in North Korea. But I think it's very important issue for us to pursue. One of the shortcomings of Sunshine Policy over the last 10 years, from 2000 through 2008, was that their assumption was to expect a positive reaction from North Korea once we provide generous assistance, once we trust them to return in a constructive way. But the North Koreans' reaction was to develop nuclear weapons in secret terms. So I think it's a kind of a lesson. It's a little bit different from what we had learned from German case. Germany, which was surrounded with at least 35 countries either free world and communist world. And in collective way, they could guarantee the security and also human rights to bring up or to create some kind of a trust or some kind of a message to be penetrated into the former East Germany. But it is very hard for us to expect North Korean people could get the right message, even though they could allow to work in market, formally or informally. But we should send the right message right to them that you should change, you should reform, and you should adopt such kind of generous proposal, not just from South Korea, but from international community to stop developing nuclear weapons. Then the international community, including South Korea, will provide economic assistance or share our lessons or experience to develop agricultural development or other humanitarian side. So that's what our government had been pursued in building up a trust with North Korea. So I think it's North Korean reaction, not just to the proposals by our president, but North Korea should realize or understand that it is good not just for their own people, but it's good for their own regime itself to survive, to cooperate, and to learn or to listen to the outside world. I think it's a good chance for them to listen directly from our president in United Nations General Assembly, face to face. And they're always saying that they couldn't trust, even though there was beautiful world. But I think as one of the so-called expert on inter-Korean relations, I think the current government proposal carries some genuine or sincerity to work together. But there are some preconditions, of course. That is denuclearization and human rights. Human rights means not just for the human rights for North Korean people, but it is good for those separate families living in both sides. So both North and South Korean government or regime or leaders should realize this kind of reality and work together, and international community also support such kind of genuine effort to build up trust on the Korean Peninsula. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Yu. And as you may know, the ironic situation we are in now in the Korean Peninsula is that it seems like that we are talking about trust, but we don't have any dialogue. Without dialogue, I don't know how can we build trust. Probably we have to talk about ways how to build trust without dialogue, probably. That's maybe the most urgent task we may have at the moment. But Frank Janucci is here, but I happened to read an article written by Vice President Biden a long time ago, then when he was a Senate delegation to Russia, most at that time in the Soviet Union, and they sat down to talk about arms reduction talks. At that time, Prime Minister Kosygin, if I may correct or not, please correct me if I am wrong. Mr. Kosygin said, okay, we have to start with the premise that we agree not to disagree. No, we agree that we disagree. And from that point, the U.S. and the Soviet Union started talks and then built some trust, and then which led to arms reduction treaty. Anyway, we are talking about inter-Korean dialogue, but still no dialogue is on. And today, probably our discussion is about how to promote this kind of dialogue in order to build up trust in the Korean Peninsula. And then with these two presentations in mind, I want to ask our four discussants. First, probably from Korean government, the policy planning Bureau Director General, Mr. Kim Kyung, you may have some thought on this kind of government policies, and why don't you start with?
지금까지 말씀하신 거에 조금 보충해서 취지하고 뭐 어려움이랄까 저희가 하려고 하는 것에 대해서 좀 명확하게 해드릴 부분이 있는 것 같습니다. 박근혜 정부가 왜 신뢰를 그렇게 강조하고 있는가 이렇게 질문을 하는 분이 계십니다. 제가 이 남북 대화 뭐 통일 업무에 한 25년 이상 그동안에 많이 해왔고 북한과 협상도 많이 해봤습니다. 근데 1971년에 남북 간의 대화가 지금 시작됐습니다. 지금부터 한 44년간 남북 간의 대화를 했는데 대화한 횟수가 630번 정도 됩니다. 630번인데 그 중에 정상회담이 2번이고 총리급 회담이 10번, 장관급 회담이 아마 셀 수 없을 정도로 많습니다. 국방장 회담을 포함해서 그렇습니다. 합의서가 몇 개냐 하면은 230개 정도 됩니다. 이걸 이제 달로 계산해 보면 한 달에 한두 번 남북의 당국자가 만나서 협상을 했고 2달에 한 번씩 합의서를 만든 겁니다. 그 합의서에 대해서 다시 말씀드리면은 같은 합의도 많이 했고 큰 합의도 있고 작은 합의도 있습니다. 그런데 지금 시점에서 70년대, 80년대, 90년대 이런 지금의 남북 관계를 비교해 보면 정확하게 개성공단이라는 게 하나 있다는 것 외에는 정치적으로나 군사적으로나 다른 여러 가지 면에서 과연 무엇이 바뀌었느냐. 관계, 아까 오전에 장관님이 얘기하셨던 그 근본적 관계가 무엇이 달라졌는가라고 저희들이 묻게 됩니다. 그러면 그렇게 많은 회담을 했고 그렇게 많은 합의를 했는데 동서독보다 더 많은 회담을 했고 합의를 했는데 왜 지금 남북관계는 이런 상황이 있느냐. 아까 개성공단이 하나 있다고 했지만 달라진 것이 또 하나 있습니다. 북한이 핵무기 개발을 했고 거의 완성 단계에 와 있다 하는 것이 또 다른 중요한 차이점입니다. 저희들은 그 부분을 고민하고 있습니다. 중요한 것은 또 대화를 해서 10번을 했던 앞으로 20번을 하게 되든 또 합의서를 뭐 30개를 만들느냐 만들지 못하느냐가 중요한 게 아니라 하나의 합의서를 만들든 한 번의 대화를 하더라도 그것이 지켜져서 앞으로의 남북관계가 지난 40여 년의 남북관계와는 조금 다른 길을 가야 되겠다. 그러니까 통일을 향해서 조금씩 다가가는 관계가 돼야 될 것 같다. 그것이 되게 시간이 걸리고 늦을 수도 있겠지만 그것이 올바른 길이다라는 생각을 하고 있습니다. 또 하나는 지금 독일 우리 자이트 대사님이 얘기를 하셨는데 우리 신뢰 프로세스를 하고 나서 1년 반 정도 지났는데 북한이 호응을 하지 않는다. 성과가 나오지 않는다. 이렇게 해서 과연 무엇을 할 수 있겠느냐. 이런 비판론들이 있습니다. 근데 먼저 독일하고만 비교를 해봐도 독일도 굉장히 어려웠다고 하지만 첫째는 국제정세 측면에서 독일이 그 일을 할 동안에는 냉전이 허물어가던 시기, 사실상의 냉전이 끝나는 시기의 국제정세, 그리고 유럽이 하나의 공동체를 이루어가던 아주 좋은 유럽의 통합 속에서 독일이 동서독이 서로 통합을 모색할 수 있던 시기였다. 그리고 동서독은 분단 이후에도 많은 교류 협력이 민간 차원에서 이루어졌고 어느 정도의 공감대, 동질성들을 유지하고 있었다. 이런 장점이 있는 반면에 남북은 지금 상황에서 보면 오히려 유럽보다 훨씬 문화적으로나 정치적으로나 주변국들의 입장에서 어떤 화합보다는 갈등적 요소가 많은 유동성이 훨씬 커지는 국제정세 상황에 있다. 그리고 남북은 서로 전쟁도 했고 정확하게 교류 협력이 그렇게 꾸준히 지속적으로 이루어지지도 못하고 있다. 이런 점에서 보면 남북 간의 신뢰를 쌓는다는 작업은 그렇게 간단한 일은 아니라고 생각을 합니다. 그러나 중요한 것은 그것이 가야 할 바른 길이라는 것은 저희들이 생각을 하고 있고요. 대화를 많이 강조하시는데 대화가 있느냐 없느냐 굉장히 중요합니다. 대화는 반드시 해야 됩니다. 근데 과거처럼 모양을 갖추기 위해서 혹은 다른 이유로 대화를 함으로써 그 자체가 아니라 다른 것을 기대하면서 대화를 한다든가 혹은 단순히 하자고 하니까 이런 식의 대화는 의미를 갖지 않는다. 그 대화를 통해서 실제로 문제를 풀 생각이 있고 서로가 필요해서 대화를 해야 된다는 거죠. 그러니까 북한이 다른 목적으로 호응하는 것이 아니라 신뢰 프로세스에 호응을 하더라도 실제로 신뢰를 쌓겠다는 생각으로 호응을 해야 되지 단순히 다른 목적으로 목적이라는 것이 여러 가지가 있을 수 있겠지만 시간을 벌기 위해서 혹은 다른 나라와의 관계를 타개하는 데 도움을 받기 위해서 그런 식의 대화를 한다면 그건 과거와 차이가 없다. 저희들이 원하는 것은 진정성 있는 같은 방향을 바라보고 문제를 풀어나갈 자세를 가지고 대화를 해야 되고 그것이 작든 크든 신뢰를 쌓을 수 있고 그게 진정하게 남북관계가 좀 나아질 수 있는 길이다. 이런 생각을 가지고 있다는 말씀드립니다.
Thank you very much. And as President Park Geun-hye stressed over and over again, and Mr. Kim also said that when we had a dialogue with North Korea, we have to check whether North Korea will have a genuine sincerity or not. And as he said, it may be the diplomatic rule when if the agreement between two sides do not correspond to their national interest. Anytime they can break up that kind of agreement. But as North Korea has done, when they come to the dialogue table, without having any intention to observe that kind of agreement, then it's not easy for the other party to continue the dialogue. That kind of position probably is the one what the President Park Geun-hye and the current government is keeping. And Mr. Kim gave us what the government has in mind as far as dialogue with North Korea is concerned. And secondly, I want to invite John Everard from former ambassador to North Korea, United Kingdom British ambassador to North Korea, and you may have a lot of interesting episodes and talks. Probably, I will ask you to give us your thought on this trust building in the Korean Peninsula.
With pleasure, Professor Chang. Firstly, many thanks to the East Asia Institute and the Ministry of Education for inviting me yet again to the Korea Global Forum. I always find these discussions extremely useful. Thank you too to the two presenters who have, I think, offered us both very informative and useful papers and a lot of food for thought. I'm grateful to both. I'm particularly grateful to Professor Yu for having said several things that I was going to say, which will save time and perhaps shorten the session slightly. Professor Yu pointed to a number of ways in which the interaction between the Republic of Korea and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is different in nature from what was going on between the West and East Europe, between East and West Germany in the 70s and 80s. Another point that I wanted to add here, that as Hans Ulrich has pointed out, if you take the CSE final act as the sort of starting point of the process, which of course there was a great deal of preparatory work before that, and the Vienna document at the end, that was CSE final to Vienna document is 15 years, 15 years. If you compare that to the speed at which negotiations between North and South Korea have advanced, negotiations, trust building in Europe clearly proceeded at a much faster rate, largely, of course, because the Eastern European, the Soviet Union and the East Germans participated in the process. As both presenters, had pointed out, one of the big problems we face now is that, putting it simply, the North Koreans will not pick up the telephone. They are not engaging, they are not talking. And a process of engagement in which one party is not engaging clearly might well disappear over the edge of infinity. There's another very important point here that I was very glad to see brought out in the first session. That in this session we are talking about Trustpolitik, the building of trust between the two Koreas and in and around the Korean Peninsula. But as we were reminded this morning, it was not the corresponding process of trust building in Europe that brought about German unification. That was started, but that happened because East Germany effectively collapsed. And it collapsed, let us not forget, through an event that nobody foresaw and that nobody even recognized as important when it happened. The spark that lit the fuse that caused the explosion was Hungary allowing its citizens a certain limited access to Austria. Within a few weeks, East Germans were driving their little Trabant cars all the way down south through Hungary into Austria. You had the outflow, and the rest, as a great man once said, is history. Within a short period of time, East Germany collapsed. That is what produced the collapse. It is that collapse that produced unification, not necessarily the process of trust building that was going on around it. And one question I wanted to put to Hans Ulrich, on which I would greatly welcome his views, is, in his view, how far did the CSE process and all that went on between the two Germanys actually condition in the end the outcome of unification? Do you think that unification would have happened in any case? Would it have happened differently? Now, all this preparatory work, what was its overall effect on the ground in the end? Moving from that point, I have to say that when I talk to Korean friends about unification, for reasons I suppose I can understand, the example that they always come up with is Germany. The parallels are so tempting. A broadly market-based economy facing a less than market-based shambles of an economy, one democratic country and one totalitarian, and just one nation with two states. I sometimes wonder whether there are closer parallels. I have yet to attend a Korean discussion where the unification of Yemen is ever discussed. If you're looking for a process of discussion that actually led to a unification, Yemen is not a neat example by any means, and I won't take everybody's time discussing how the PDRY came to be absorbed into the unified Yemen in the end. But it is perhaps a closer example of what I understand President Park is trying to achieve than what actually happened in Germany. Taking the camera back a little bit further, taking a wider view, if you are looking for an attempt to achieve unification purely through a process of negotiation, then there are many examples around the world. I don't want to depress everybody, but I can't find one example where the process has actually worked. I've got a list here, I won't go through them all. I think one very interesting one is the process in Central America. I believe we are honored today by the presence of a representative of the Republic of Guatemala. Is he still here? He's escaped. Okay, never mind. I was going to ask for some help with facts, but the Central American Union started negotiation towards eventual unification of the Central American republics over 100 years ago. I mean, you guys think that you've been negotiating for a few decades, and that's a long time. You know, others have been at it a lot longer. Remember, too, that the reason that the Korean Peninsula is divided is through two acts of violence, the Japanese occupation and then the Korean War. And violence tends to produce alienation and different systems. In the case of the Central Americans, they didn't even have that. Central America was divided because of for interesting historical reasons associated with the Panama Canal, but essentially just because somebody split up Central America along the lines of what had been county boundaries in the old Republic of Colombia. There's no cultural distinction at all. And so they were starting from a situation where they were actually much closer already than the two Koreas are now. Sorry, this is getting gloomy. And they're still talking to this day. I think I'll shut up before I depress everybody further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And rather pessimistic view of unification through negotiation. But we are committed to that kind of the idea now. But now I want to invite Francois Nicolas from France, and only female participant here, and you may give us another fresh, stimulating thought.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for having me here back in Seoul after some time. I'm not coming here. Well, I'm not sure that the organizers were fully aware when they invited me that they actually made a smart choice. So why such a smart choice? Well, let me explain. Well, the thing is that at the very beginning of my professional career at IFRI, at the French Institute of International Relations, the first assignment I was given back in the early 1990s was precisely to conduct research on German reunification. So after that,
why don't you give us some thought on
after that
about your institute?
Yeah.
Just give a brief account of what your institute.
Oh, my institute is a private research think tank in France, and we do any kind of research on international relations. I now specialize on East Asia. At the time, I was not working on East Asia at all, and so at the time, I was asked to conduct some research on German reunification. And the interesting thing is that at the time, people in France were extremely concerned about the rise of this big giant. You know, Germany at the time was considered to be what we called a political dwarf and already an economic giant. And so with German reunification, we were concerned because we were afraid that this giant would be both an economic giant and a political giant. So there were huge concerns in France about that. And so I was asked to examine what was going on in Germany and whether Germany would become indeed a giant in all aspects. And so the research gave birth to a book that was actually co-authored with a German researcher, a colleague of mine. And this book had a relatively provocative title, because the title was Germany Towards a New Hegemony. Well, there was a question mark at the end. We actually debated whether we should put a question mark or not, and we decided to put a question mark just, you know, to make the title a little bit less provocative. And actually, in the book, the answer to this question was no. Germany will not become a giant trying to crush the rest of Europe, in particular France. And the gist of the book was to say that it was actually much better for Europe and for France in particular to have a stronger Germany than to have a weaker Germany. So without knowing it, and in a totally different context, I think that the main message in our book was that there was some kind of a unification bonanza. So even without President Park's knowing it, we had pushed this idea of the reunification bonanza at the time. So it is from this perspective that I will give a couple of comments about the topic of this afternoon. And I guess my remarks will be more bridging the early afternoon session and this session. I will be talking about trust, but we'll also be talking about reunification and the process of reunification and what Germany may have to tell us about this process. So, and I'm afraid I will repeat a couple of things which have been said by a couple of people earlier this afternoon. The first thing is that, well, I see reunification as taking place in two different phases or moments. And the first phase is the pre-reunification phase. And I'm afraid that in this pre-reunification, or the actual process towards unification, I'm afraid that, well, the German example doesn't have much to offer. And this is a point that has already been made a couple of times by Vasily Mikheyev earlier this afternoon. In the case of Germany, a reunification came as a result of the collapse of East Germany. And so it was not the result of a deliberate policy, of a deliberate effort on the part of West Germany. It just happened by chance. And so there is no way that we can really infer any lessons from this, this experience. Well, unless the South Korean policy is predicated on the assumption of the collapse of the North Korean regime, but I'm afraid this is not really possible to do that, and it's a point, again, that has been made earlier this afternoon. To come back to other possible parallels, so something was suggested by the former discussant. Let me also suggest another parallel which may be more relevant to the Korean case, and it is not the German parallel, but it would be the Chinese parallel. So in the case of Korea, the one country, two systems may actually be more relevant than the German reunification process. This little snag is that if it is a more relevant parallel, it may not lead to a very encouraging result, since what we see, what we have seen very well lately, is that this one country, two system doesn't necessarily deliver what is expected from it. So I'm not sure that it's more encouraging. The second moment of unification is post-reunification. And on this moment, on this phase of reunification, I guess that Germany has a lot to offer. So post-reunification, where there are positive lessons that may be drawn, and positive lessons mean measures that were put in place in the German case and that may be replicated in the Korean case, as well as negative lessons meaning things that have been done in the German case and that were mistakes and that should be avoided at all costs. So the two sides are possible. In this case, I guess that the one major issue, but I would like to have Mr. Asai's view on that. One major issue in the case of Germany was the monetary issue. And I'm not too sure that the choice that was made was the right one. So it may be a tricky one. And in the case of Korea, this monetary issue will certainly pop up if ever there is a reunification. And that may be a tricky choice. So I guess, or I would suggest, to examine the German experience very closely in order to perhaps avoid the same mistake if it was a mistake, and I would love to have your view on that. But anyway, a closer look at the German experience will certainly help structure the discourse in Korea on the unification bonanza. If you look at the German case, you may highlight the good sides, the positive aspects, and so it will help structure the whole discourse on the part of the government. There is another interesting thing about the post-reunification process, and it is the fact that at the end of the day, you may end up with what I may call, a bit bluntly, second-rate citizens. And this is something that should be avoided. So I don't know to what extent, I may be blunt, I may be, again, a little bit provocative, I don't know to what extent today, in today's Germany, some citizens still feel that they are slightly different. I'm not too sure that even after 25 years of unified Germany, all Germans really feel the same. I don't know, that's a provocation. So I would like to hear your view on that. But if it is not the case, then again, it is something that has been, kept in mind, and this does not make the whole process very easy. Just one final point, perhaps, because I've been too long. It's one point that was made by Mr. Zeitz earlier, and it's the case about the point about economic cooperation that is the very basis for building trust. So I'm coming back to the trust building thing. And economic cooperation is certainly a major factor in building trust. But in the case of Korea, the problem is that there doesn't seem to be much goodwill on one side. And so you may want to engage in economic cooperation, but if there is no strong will on the other side, this economic cooperation may not deliver the result that you expect. And that brings me to my very last point about trust. I think that the problem in Korea and in Germany is, well, the problems are very different. In the case of Germany, the point was to create trust vis-à-vis the other partners within the region facing this new unified Germany. In the case of Korea, the trust building problem has to do with the guy on the other side of the border. It's not, the trust doesn't have to be created with the others in the region. The trust has to be created with the partner in the negotiation. And this is the really tricky part. And again, I'm afraid that on this point, there is not much that the German case may offer.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. François Nicolas. And probably, as you said, we may have to broaden our perspective on unification parallels beyond Germany, not simply limit ourselves to Germany. But you may have to know that, when I was a college student, Great Britain and the United States are the only model countries. Party systems and the politics are the one, and also economic development model. But these days, American politics is terrible. It's much worse than Korean politics. And also Great Britain, as you happen to see that there was a Scottish independence movement. We want to see that kind of independence movement there. And Germany all of a sudden emerged as the model country for our not only political unification but also our economic model as well. And during the presidential campaign, the President Park Geun-hye came up with the idea of economic democratization. That has probably created a large reservoir of supporters. But that concept came from the German social market economy model. And Germany all of a sudden has become our model, not only for unification, but also our politics and for our economy. That's the thing, and we have to think about. But as you suggested, probably we may have to move beyond Germany for our unification. And finally, before I would ask our final discussion to make a comment, I want to ask the floor to give questions and these kind of things before our last discussion made the comments. And lastly, Georg Trolaya and Ruski Mir Foundation from Russia. Okay, I want to ask you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I must thank the East Asian Institute and Minister of Unification for having me here again at this prestigious forum. As well, half of my life was spent in North and South Korea, so I think it's a particular pleasure to speak again to such an interested audience, and also it's an advantage to speak the last, because I don't have to repeat what others have said, to which I agree, and I can spare my time by naming only a few things that I disagree with, and these are the notions of, well, forthcoming collapse of North Korea, and that would be the only way for unification, or the notion that North Koreans may denuclearize prior to any benefits they get, and this is a precondition for any dialogue. Well, trust building is a good process, and I like the term. And so I strongly support that the trust was put into the center of President Park's policy. However, you should try to understand what's the purpose of this process. If you mean that trust building is making North Koreans trust you and not necessarily trust North Koreans, you won't get very far. In case you want to change your partner's mentality or to change your partner's point of view without giving some compromise, you won't get there very far either. So whenever I hear a formula or in a sentence that North Koreans must or should do something, I don't listen any further. You have to understand your partner and take into account their views, to accommodate them, not trying to make them change them. Because, well, 70 years of Korean division shows that just gives no result. I have no sympathy or particular affection for North Korean regime. I'm just realistic and knowing that you cannot depend on just words and proclamations alone to get any result. And to get some results, you have to really try to understand your partner. You may like him or not, you may trust him or not, but you have to understand him. How can anybody be serious by suggesting North Koreans first to sincerely underwrite the denuclearization and then talk? Well, this is a non-starter. Is demanding at this stage denuclearization as a prior step is like, talking to a Muslim, demanding first you change your faith and then we'll talk and you will get a lot of benefits. So this is something that won't get any far. And the problem is that the concepts of unification or dialogue in North Korea and South Korea at this point of time are asymmetric. Well, North Koreans, some part of their establishment, military establishment, they might still cherish a dream of unifying Korea by their control, of occupying South Korea. And that's why they demand that the US troops should be withdrawn from South Korea, and there's still, some hopes and some unfulfillable dreams they have. But that's maybe 1/10, 10% of their perception. 90% of their unification or reunification or North-South policy is self-preservation. Self-preservation of this regime, who you may call inhumane, you may call totalitarian, but it is there. And to talk to this regime, you should understand its nature. This is a hereditary aristocracy, already in the 4th generation, which is not just a Kim's family rule, but a very coherent elite, and which can be described as having a high level of asabiya, well, of coherence, which is interwoven by family ties, personal, friendly, etc. ties, and this elite is the only thing that matters in North Korea. Nobody is going to ask the masses, do you like it or not? Will masses, well, revolt or not? Because this is the position of this elite which we deal with, and with which we have no other source of power in North Korea to deal with. So we have to take into account their positions, their thoughts, especially because they have no exit strategy. Unification by South Korean scenario means disappearance of North Korea as a state. These people won't just become second-rate citizens like in Germany, like Francois mentioned. They would have to, to disappear. They would have to, many of them will be tried and maybe sentenced. Some of them will just lose everything. So they have to fight for their lives and the lives of their families, and you cannot expect them just to accept words, not deeds. I do like the very insightful words of Prime Minister Yeong, who talked about the need to preserve 2 states for the time being, because only this can have an eventual eventual result of building trust between the two halves of this nation enough to move further, to create maybe a confederation or even a single government, that will take a long, long time. It won't happen tomorrow. The idea of small steps, which was suggested by Ambassador Zaid, I think it's very helpful, and you should. I think it's important to engage in earnest, not to engage in order to undermine this regime. I've heard this idea for some time already. Last time it was in San Diego in United States, where we had the Northeast Asia Cooperation Dialogue, that the goal of engagement is, well, undermining the current regime and making it change and disappear eventually. You know, you may dislike North Koreans, but they're not idiots, and they're over-suspicious, and you cannot build trust in this way.
Okay.
And one more point, and also I would like to ask about the South Korean government position on the trust building. You know, there are some things like, for example, U.S. missile defense installation here, which do not improve trust, at least from Russian or Chinese side. And one final policy recommendation to the South Korean government, which you asked for. When the South Korean government plans some kind of policy steps toward North Korea, why wouldn't different experts be ordered or suggested to prepare a scenario of answer, North Korean answer to this step? Several scenarios. And if any scenarios would be right, these people should be rewarded. If not, they should be fired.
Okay, before I turn to presenters to respond to the questions, there is one specific question to you. Mm-hmm. And if you are a advisor to Kim Jong-un government, what kind of advice are you going to give to Secretary Kim Jong-un to improve inter-Korean relations? That's the question raised by the floor. Okay.
Right now?
Yeah, right now.
Say it again. What?
If you are an advisor to Kim Jong-un, and what kind of advice you are going to give him to improve inter-Korean relations?
Well, I think I would tell him, just please stop provocations.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then I want to ask Mr. Chai to respond to comments and questions. And
thank you.
You have only 5 minutes. Okay.
Yes. Okay. As always in Korea, the questions are stimulating, the discussion is interesting, so I have to be very short. First, Professor Chang, you mentioned the relationship between domestic policy and a strategy of trust. In Germany, many people always doubted whether we should continue this policy. And there were, of course, reasons for that. East Germany, for example, gave refuge to the terrorists of the Baader-Meinhof gang. Mm-hmm. They planted a spy in the immediate surroundings of Federal Chancellor Willy Brandt. His personal assistant was an East German spy. There were other things. At every occasion there was a review. Should we continue this policy despite these setbacks? And always the review came to the same result. Yes, this was a serious setback, but we have to continue. Mm-hmm. And this conviction was later joined even by conservative critics. This development is also seriously studied, I know, here in Korea. For example, your ambassador Gwan, the Korean ambassador to China, he's an expert how the German conservative movement reconciled itself to the idea of trust building vis-à-vis East Germany. Mm-hmm. We were not naive. We knew that the other side was very serious about undermining us. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, we stayed the course. Mm-hmm. Secondly, well, about post-unification secondary citizens. Well, I'm not complaining. Our federal president, he's an East German Protestant. Our federal chancellor is an East German lady. I'm also daughter of a Protestant pastor. I'm a South German Catholic. By the way, our new permanent secretary, the foreign minister, is also from East Germany, also the son of a Protestant pastor. I'm not complaining that I'm a secondary citizen. Another post-unification lesson concerning money and the state budget. The last time we had in West Germany a balanced budget was in the year 1969, 21 years before reunification. The first time we will have a balanced budget after reunification will be next year in 2015, 25 years later. So it's possible. It was possible 21 years before reunification. It's possible 25 years after reunification, and we'll hope that it will stay also in the future like this. However, of course, there were preconditions for a successful policy of trust and détente. One precondition was also the Soviet-American détente, starting in the 60s and then again regaining momentum after the Reykjavik meeting between Reagan and Gorbachev. This was important, but it was also important that we all had regained the trust of the leadership in Moscow and in East Germany. In particular, in East Germany with regard to their own political future. The communist leadership in East Germany knew that they were facing trials after reunification, and some of them were condemned for several years of prison. Not all of them, but those who committed crimes, yes. The others, they lost their power, but they continued to live as German citizens and not as secondary class German citizens.
Pensioners, as a pensioners. Huh?
And for me, the most moving event this year was on the 13th of August 2014 in front of the Brandenburg Gate. The 13th of August is the day when the East Germany erected the Berlin Wall. And on August 13th, 2014, a group of Korean bikers took their bikes and started a ride to Korea. Through Poland, through Lithuania, through the Russian Federation, through China, and then by boat from Vladivostok back to Korea, because they could not pass through North Korea.
Okay.
And who was sitting in the first line of the invited guests? It was Hans Modrow, the last communist prime minister of the GDR. So afterwards, I went to him and said, Mr. Modrow, thank you for being here with us. He said, of course I'm here, because I believe that in the end it was a success, and I also hope that one day Korea will follow the path of Germany.
Okay.
And he's still a member of the successor party of the Communist Party.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I have a couple of questions and comment on my argument. But I want to say that when we learn lessons from German experience to reunify, then North Korea also got more lessons not to be observed, as they call it, absorption. And therefore, I think it is not easy for us to follow what German had made to bring about so-called revolution in East Germany, to want to reunify their fatherland. So I think it's correct that John said that it is not a negotiation, but it is the collapse. But it is very difficult. It's almost impossible for us to expect collapse of North Korean regime at this time, because they already developed their nuclear weapons to defend themselves. And also they still maintain their brutal totalitarian systems. They still maintain their prisoners camp. As we had observed last year, that even the second man, Jang Sung-tae, was executed. Even he supported his new leader, Kim Jong-un, for his hurt. And therefore, I think it is time for us to think about how to encourage North Korean people to get new information and new ideas in the case of process of improvement of inter-Korean relations, and also in after the unification itself. So I think the pressure against North Korean regime is one thing, and to provide some motivation for North Korean people to change their own system is another. So inter-Korean relations maybe lead to unification, but it is not exactly the same. As we had seen in the poll among South Koreans, more young generation, more young people in South Korea, they do not want to care about unification itself. And therefore, I think one of the reasons why President Park Geun-hye mentioned early this year that unification might be a bonanza. It's not just for taking North Korea, absorb North Korea, but it is a kind of a motivation for our young generation in South Korea to work for the unification, because it could be a good thing for them in the future. And also, the final point is that we should, well, according to some questions about it, we could maintain May 21st measurement or sanction, not just because we hope or expect the North Korean leader or elite to follow or they just give up their own privileges, but it is kind of a hidden, unexpected effect that we would observe this time. As we have seen in the past, when we provide a generous assistance to North Korea, it's just good. Well, actually, we provide fertilizers or grains to feed North Korean people in general, but it gave some power for the regime itself because they control the material to distribute. So therefore, most North Korean refugees here in South Korea oppose to provide generous assistance to North Korea. And also, according to the sanction against North Korea by South Korea or international community, so we now see the market economy inside North Korea. Well, of course, North Korean leaders would not want to see that kind of things. They want to maintain their own system, planning economy, and some kind of totalitarian system itself, dynastic system. But because of the sanction, they had to allow reluctantly to see the operation of market. And I think it's a good positive or signal for us to see certain changes, certain new sharing of information among North Korean people. So we could expect that kind of a hidden effect or unintended consequences of our policy toward North Korea.
Okay,
thanks,
Professor Yu. I am under serious pressure from the organizing committee to finish our discussion 5 minutes to 5, and there is some questions about the current government's North Korean policy, and Mr. Kim, you can give.
그 질문하신 거는 두
간단하게
개인데,
답변해 주세요.
예, 간단히 대화를 뭐 신뢰 프로세스 좋고 대화를 해야 되는데 북한이 응하지 않는데 어떻게 할 거냐, 뭐 이런 질문, 예, 이런 질문이신 것 같습니다. 간단히 말씀드리겠습니다. 기본적으로 저희들이 말하는 신뢰 프로세스를 굉장히 어렵게 생각을 하고 있는 것 같은데, 간단히 말씀드리면 약속을 지키면 됩니다. 약속을 지키면 되는 것이 신뢰 프로세스입니다. 근데 이게 뭐냐, 북한한테 어떤 조건을 얘기하고 있는 것도 아니고 뭘 하라고 하는 것도 아니고, 대화에 나와서 얘기를 하고 자기들이 하겠다고 한 것은 지키면 됩니다. 근데 지금까지 안 된 게 아니라 개성공단이 중단되었을 때, 작년에 4월에 중단됐는데 협상을 했고, 저희들은 만약에 북한이 저희들에게 약속을 하지 않았다면 재가동이 되지 않았을지도 모릅니다. 당시에 북한은 제가 수석대표로 나가서 했지만 분명히 약속을 했습니다. 어떤 일이 있더라도, 어떤 정세 변화가 있더라도 자기들은 앞으로는 개성단이 잘 될 수 있도록 협조를 할 것이고 피해에 대해서도 보상할 것이고, 이런 약속들을 했죠. 그러면 지금 가장 북한이 보여줘야 될 첫 번째 중요한 것 중에 하나는 약속한 거를 지키는 겁니다. 약속한 걸 지키면 우리도 북한에 대한 믿음이 생기는 것이고, 또 그 과정에서 북한도 우리를 믿게 되는 것이고, 약속을 안 지키면 믿음이 아니라 이제 불신이 생기는 거죠. 그러니까 지금 현재 약속했던 것들이 잘 되고 있는가 하는 것이 저희들은 중요한 가늠자로 보고 있다. 그리고 미래에 어떻게 될 것이냐, 1년 반인데 3년 다 가면 어떡하냐 하는데, 어떤 분들은 어두울 때, 이렇게 어두운데 언제 해가 뜰까 하고 걱정하는 분도 있고, 어떤 분은 되게 어두울 때 해 뜨기 직전이 가장 어둡다, 라고 생각하는 분도 있습니다. 지금 저희들에게 필요한 것은 조급해하기보다는 조급 인내심을 갖고 일관성 있게 우리의 원칙을 좀 지켜나가는 게 필요하다고 생각을 합니다.
Thank you. And must be a lot of questions and comments in the floor as well as among our participants, but organizing committee asked us to finish 5 minutes to 5 because they may have another event immediately after this session. And once again, thank you very much for your presentation and discussions, and also participation from the floor. I, as a chair of this session, once again I appreciate your cooperation and attention. Thank you very much.